Snow flurried across the ramparts of Winterfell like restless ash, swirling in eddies of pale gray dusk. In the courtyard below, torches shimmered against ancient stone, their orange tongues licking the cold as if to thaw the castle's long-frozen memories. Arya Stark stood upon a high walkway beside a crooked gargoyle, cloak flapping around her slender frame, eyes narrowed against the stinging wind. All around her, Winterfell muttered in the hush between battles. Wood groaning, ravens croaking, the distant beat of the forge, and beneath it everything, the subdued pulse of an uncertain peace. In the weeks since the long night had broken upon the field of fire and ice, every hour felt both earned and borrowed. Soldiers limped about in mismatched mail, mending walls or burying friends. Sansa held councils in the great hall, measured, steady, cautious. Bran watched through hooded lids, speaking rarely yet knowing much. Jon rode the timberline alone some mornings, returning with shadows in his eyes. But Arya hunted silence. She prowled the vaulting corridors and parapets, restless, alert, carrying within her a tension like a drawn bow that never quite loosed. She supposed she should have felt triumphant. The Night King shattered beneath her Valyrian blade. The dead set ablaze, the world still breathing because she had leapt. Yet victory tasted thin on her tongue. Too many ghosts on the wind, too many questions unasked, and somewhere south, 3 dragons screaming in pain and fury. She could almost hear their chorus in her dreams, a thunderous wail of loss that woke her sweating beneath heavy furs. She had seen dragons before, above the Blackwater rush, their wings eclipsing the sun, and more recently upon Winterfell's own roofs, but she had never felt them quite so close, as if the roar were inside her skull, the wing beats matching the hammering of her heart. This night, she lingered longer than she should, ignoring the ache in her knees, where old bruises purpled against pale skin. Beyond the battlements, the dark pines swayed under a half moon. Somewhere amid that vastness a shape moved. Low, enormous, rippling with scarlet heat. She blinked. At first she thought it memory. Then rubies of fire glimmered between the trees, and the air shivered with a deep, resonant growl. The guard on the west tower shouted. Horns brayed. Men scrambled to the walls. Arya's fingers found the hilt of needle by instinct, though the blade felt laughably small, compared to the shadow now stalking toward Winterfell, like the embodiment of some forgotten god. The shape advanced, vast wings partially unfurled, eyes glowing ember-red. Smoke curled from slit nostrils. It was Drogon, riderless, awe-inspiring, and grazed by countless wounds that glistened where moonlight met scale. Chaos erupted. Archers raised bows only to be cursed back by captains. Sansa appeared below, robes pulled hastily over nightdress, ordering the gates be barred yet not fired upon, for the dragon bore no malice, at least not yet. Jon galloped from the stables, sword unsheathed, voice hoarse as he pleaded calm. Bran's wheelchair squeaked along frozen earth, pushed by Podrick, the 3-guyed raven's gaze unreadable. The castle bristled with fear and wonder, but Arya moved differently. Down stone steps, across the courtyard, beneath a trembling portcullis, as if drawn upon an invisible thread. Up close, Drogon was ruin made flesh, torn membranes, seared talons, patches of scale scorched black. Yet the heat radiating from him was something alive, a furnace fury masked by exhaustion. He rumbled, scenting the air. Snow hissed to steam where it touched him. Then his head swung toward Arya, and the world contracted to 2 molten eyes and 1 stubborn shadow of a girl. She felt no fear. Even as memory flashed, wildfire explosions in King's Landing, Lannister bells ringing, screams filling alleys. No tremor shook her spine. Instead there came a slow, deep thrum, matching the beat of her own pulse, as though some hidden note had resonated out of her bones at last. Dragons were not supposed to kneel, yet Drogon dipped his massive head, nostrils flaring mere feet from her boots. A breath like a forge rushed over her, carrying the scent of ash and distant oceans. Arya stepped forward. Voices behind her shouted warnings, but they fell away like leaves torn from a branch. She lifted 1 gloveless hand and laid it upon the dragon's snout. The scale beneath was surprisingly smooth, warmer than any forge, humming faintly. The heat should have burned. Instead it seeped up her arm like lighting a hearth after a winter wander. Drogon exhaled, a shuddering sigh rather than flame, and his eyelids closed halfway. What passed between them in that moment could not be measured by maesters' tongues. It was part grief, part solace, and something else, an unspoken pact. He had lost his mother, his siblings, his purpose. She had lost innocence, family direction. Together they recognized in each other a fierce refusal to be broken. On the parapet high above, Bran's fingers clenched the arm of his chair, though his face betrayed no surprise. The gate creaked open behind her, and Jon approached slowly, cloak snapping. "Arya," he called, voice raudo. "Step back." She did not. Drogon rumbled, and a ripple of tension froze every watcher along the wall. Arya turned slightly, meeting Jon's eyes with a calm older than her years. "He won't harm me," she said. She wasn't certain how she knew, yet the certainty felt as solid as the direwolf carved upon Winterfell's gates. He came for something. Flames flickered in Drogon's throat, not in threat but in need. His long neck bore ugly welts. Arya saw it then. The dragon was starving. Dany had always ridden him to distant hunts, guided his fire. Alone he had traveled farther north than any dragon had dared since the Doom, perhaps following the faint thread of her that lingered in Jon. Yet what he truly sought remained unreached until this instant. "Open the yard," Arya said to no one and everyone. "Let him rest." It took courage, or perhaps the exhaustion of battle-weary hearts, but Winterfell obeyed. The great inner yard cleared. Fires were lit in braziers, cattle driven from distant pens. Drogon folded his wings with a groan like settling mountains, and eased his bulk down upon the packed earth. His tail coiled around the weirwood stump where once a training post stood. Arya stayed by his head, resting her palm upon the ridge between his eyes, until at last they slid shut in sleep. Hours later, she sat upon the dragon's foreleg beneath a flickering torch, while Maester Walken stitched hide thicker than oak bark, with a curved needle bigger than Arya's knife. Snow melted to muddy rivulets around them. She watched the maester's careful hands, offering water when needed. Hound-like, Drogon dozed, occasionally huffing plumes of smoke that curled round Arya like protective arms. "Dragons do not simply choose new riders," Walken murmured, knotting thread. Arya shrugged, gaze never leaving the rise and fall of Drogon's massive flank. "Maybe he hasn't. Maybe I have merely chosen him." "Mer?" The maester eyed her, but there was respect in that gaze, as if some ancient rulebook had cracked open at the spine. "Your blood is northern," he said softly, "but your veins hold storm as much as snow." She didn't answer. The words felt irrelevant. She remembered old Nan's tales. The first men who spoke with direwolves, the children who sang down giants. Perhaps dragons could speak too, not in words but in the silent grammar of flame and breath and boundless sky, and perhaps tonight she had learned the first sentence. Elsewhere within Winterfell, fear mingled with intrigue. Sansa convened a whispered council by the hearth, lords and ladies trading rumors like cards. Some called the dragon omen, others weapon. Tyrion paced before the fire, wine untasted, muttering of prophecy and mistakes. Devo stood calm, pointing out that none alive knew how to coax a dragon who had bonded with a Stark girl who wielded cat's whisker in one hand and Valyrian steel in the other. Gendry watched the windows, jaw tight. The hound sat in silence in the corner, one eye on the high window where Drogon's wingtips could be seen silhouetted against the moon, his expression unreadable. Bran spoke at last, voice like dry leaves. "No forge burns hotter than destiny." That ended debate, for no one wished to argue with a seer whose mind walked among crows and weirwoods. Night yielded eventually to a bruised dawn. Arya woke tucked against Drogon's shoulder, cloak dusted with hoarfrost. Her muscles ached, but something inside felt broadened, as if her lungs had grown to hold more sky. She rose, stretched, and noticed branched scars across Drogon's chest, knitting already. Dragonfire or dragonblood healed what needle and thread could not. When she whispered his name, one vast eye opened, reflecting her like a candlelit lake. She smiled. That morning, Arya approached the paddocks and selected a half-grown goat. She carried it herself, passing bewildered stable boys, dragging the tether through the snow. Drogon sniffed, lifted his neck, swallowed the goat whole with a crunch of snapping bone. He chuffed satisfaction and nudged Arya gently, almost knocking her onto her back. She laughed, the sound sharp and unused, and rubbed the ridge of scales under his jaw. Soon offering became ritual. 3 times a day, Arya fed him from Winterfell's stores, leading livestock into the yard. Men watched from balconies, silent, awestruck. She spoke to the dragon as she would to Nymeria years ago, recounting memories of Bravos, of hot pies bread, of water dancing and the Red Keep's dungeons. Drogon's great head would tilt as if listening intently, smoke trickling from nostrils in lazy rings. At dusk, she traced the scars along his wings, learning the map of his pain. Here a lance from Meereen, there a scorpion bolt from King's Landing. She promised he would never again be alone. On the 5th day she brought him to the Godswood. The weirwood's red leaves whispered secrets older than walls. Drogon hesitated at the gate, as if sensing in that sacred space a power equal to his own. Arya coaxed him forward. The dragon lowered his head to the still pond beside the heart tree and drank. Ripples, distorting crimson reflections. When he raised his neck, beads of water shone like tears along obsidian scales. Bran watched from beneath the weirwood's face, expression unreadable, but his lips curved almost into a smile. Later, Arya found herself before the forge. Gendry hammered steel upon anvil, sparks flying. She leaned against a beam, arms folded, watching muscle ripple beneath sweat-damp linen. He paused, wiped his brow, and met her gaze. "How is your pet?" She arched an eyebrow. "He might call you Snack if he heard that." Gendry's grin flashed, but it faded quickly. "People are scared, Arya. Sansa most of all. They've only just buried the dead. A dragon in the yard feels like another war marching to their gates." "There no one's pen." She dropped her eyes to the glowing blade. "Drogon fought for us long before he came here, and he's wounded. I won't turn him away. Just be careful." Gendry resumed his hammering, the ring of steel punctuating his word. "Broken things can be dangerous. So can healed things," she replied, pushing off the beam. "Especially when they remember who hurt them." Weeks stretched. Snow softened to slush. Ravens carried news southward. Cersei dead beneath red stone. Daenerys unaccounted for. Storm's End rebuilding. The Reach fracturing. The realm trembled like glass. Tales of a lone dragon roosting in the north reached small folk, morphing with every mile into legends. Some swore he could melt entire keeps with a sigh. Others claimed he slept curled around a white wolf like some mythic sentinel. Few believed a slip of a girl held his reins. That notion belonged to singers, not lords. One mist-shrouded dawn, Arya stood upon Drogon's shoulder, hand gripping a jagged spine. The dragon crouched, muscles coiling. She felt through her boots the potent tension of flight. She had dreamed it night after night. The lurching leap, the rush of air, the world dwindling beneath. Yet she waited, heart thrumming against ribs, mindful of precipice and promise. Jon arrived, boot crunching. "Are you certain?" he asked. "A fall from that height." She gave him a look. "I once leapt from a balcony in Bravos to chase a cat. Hardly the same, but I survived." He smirked, but unease lingered in his eyes. "Dragons are not cats. Neither am I." She pressed a palm to Drogon's warm hide. "He wants the sky. So do I." Jon swallowed, hazel gaze flicking between sister and beast. He sheathed Longclaw. "Dado Aishin." "Then fly," he said quietly. No horn signaled the moment. No banners waved. Drogon merely surged upward, wings cracking open like thunderheads. Snow exploded under the downbeat. The castle fell away in a blur of stone and startled shouts. Arya gripped the ridge, leaning into the wind as it screamed past. She felt the burn of speed along cheeks, tears streaming. Yet there was no fear, only exhilaration. This was what her blood had yearned for since she first sprinted across Winterfell's rooftops as a child. They soared above forests where dire wolves prowled and argent rivers coiled like silver serpents. Clouds parted before them, sun painting scales with molten gold. Arya laughed aloud, the sound whipped away by gale. She leaned forward, urging Drogon faster, and he answered with a roar that rattled her very bones. The wind smelled of pine and distant seas, of promise. For a heartbeat, the world narrowed to two hearts beating in furious harmony. When they descended, wings cupping the air with grace belying such mass, Arya slid down Drogon's shoulder onto the soft snowbank, knees buckling with the rush of returning gravity. She lay there laughing until lungs burned, while Drogon nudged her side gently, warm breath fogging around them like mist. That night, Winterfell feasted. Sansa declared it a celebration of the living. Tables groaned beneath roast venison, onion pies, and honeyed bread. Mugs clinked. The hall buzzed with half-drunk songs. Yet whispers threaded the merriment. The wolf of the air, the girl of many faces, the dragon sworn to the north. Arya sat at the high table but tasted little, skin humming still with altitude and starlight. At intervals, her eyes drifted toward the shuttered windows, ears attuned for the rumble of wings outside. Tyrion took the seat beside her, refilling his goblet. "You've done something impossible," he noted, voice pitched low. Again. She arched a brow. "Is impossible so rare? You walked into the crypts drunk on wildfire and lived. True, but there were no dragons." He swirled wine. "Tell me, what do you intend now that you command the skies?" "I don't command him," she corrected. "We've chosen each other. And I intend nothing but to keep him safe." "Men," Tyrion sipped. "Safety is a curious ambition for someone who killed the Night King." She shrugged. "Killing is easy. Living afterward takes work." Tyrion's smile was rueful. "You might find the realm less forgiving than a dragon." Arya considered that. Let the realm be warned. Across the hall, Gendry laughed with Podrick, but his eyes strayed to Arya now and again. The hound leaned against a wall, tearing bread with scarred hands, glowering at any who approached. Jon spoke earnestly to Davos, gestures tracing maps unseen. Bran sat still, though ravens alighted upon the sill behind him, as if listening through his silence. Overhead, banners of the direwolf rustled, and flickering torchlight cast their shadows to dance like restless spirits. When the feast waned, Arya quit the hall, slipping into night's hush. She made for the Godswood. Drogon lay beyond its gate, coils of steam rising from his nostrils where they touched the snow. She settled beside his jaw, back against warm scale, and drew her cloak tight. Above, the blend of cloud and moon painted groves silver. She recited softly the names she once whispered each night. Joffrey, Cersei, Meryn Trant. Yet now the litany felt distant, hollow. Most were dead. Some she had ceased to hate. Perhaps vengeance, like swords, dulled with overuse. "Who am I now?" she murmured. Her question misted the air. Drogon's eye cracked open, the slit pupil reflecting moonlight. She felt his ancient regard settle upon her. The weight of a creature who had lived war, conquest, loss. Maybe he wondered likewise. Who was a dragon without his mother of dragons? In that shared uncertainty, a strange comfort bloomed. Days led to weeks while winter loosened its grip. Arya and Drogon mapped the north from white shores to shadowed peaks. They found lonely watchtowers where children waved with mittened hands, fishing villages where old men bowed in reverence, high valleys where wild goats scattered at the shadow of wings. Each landing sparked new legends. Songs spread quicker than ravens. Songs of she-wolf skies, of the Lady of No Face, of dragon and direwolf together. Yet not all hearts beat welcome. At White Harbor, Manderly envoys warned of lords who muttered about Targaryen tyranny reborn. In the Neck, Crannog men sent word of archers testing dragonglass-tipped bolts. Across the narrow sea, Sellswords whispered that a Dragonrider might carve kingdoms if she wished. Power drew fear, and fear drew blades. One crisp dawn, a raven arrived bearing the seal of King's Landing. 3 lions quartered with a rose upon golden field. Queen Margaery Tyrell Lannister, newly crowned after tenuous alliances, invited, or demanded, the presence of Lady Arya Stark to treat for peace and the future of dragons in the realm. The scroll dripped with courtesy yet reeked of caution. The South remembered Harrenhal's cinders all too well. Sansa read the message aloud in council. Flicker of candlelight painted her face in stern relief. "They fear what they do not control," she said, "and they would chain what they fear." Jon leaned upon the table, jaw set. "If Arya goes south, she walks into a pit of vipers. They will seek to seize Drogon. Then Jon won't see you." Tyrion, thoughtful, tapped the parchment. Better to negotiate terms than invite preemptive war. Still, the South will never rest easy with a free Dragonrider unallied. All eyes turned to Arya. She spun needle idly between fingers, gaze distant. At length she said, "I will not be kept behind walls while others decide my fate, nor will Drogon." Sansa sighed. "Sister, you cannot duel an entire realm. Watch me." Bran's voice carried despite softness. "Paths diverge here. One road yields to chains, the other to fire. But there is always a third road, hidden, waiting." "Ina." Arya studied him. Sometimes she wondered whether he spoke to her or through her. Either way, the thought of a third path lingered like a lantern flickering in fog. That evening, Arya sat upon the battlements again, legs dangling, wind cold on cheeks. Below, snowdrops pushed through slush. First timid notes of spring. She considered King's Landing, the Red Keep's corridors where she once stalked faces, the dungeons where dragons once screamed under Aegon's Hill. She imagined Drogon chained in subterranean gloom, his fire turned against him. Something hollow twisted inside her at the thought. But the realm needed peace. Sansa sought to guard the north. Jon sought unity. Bran saw possibilities. And Arya? She had never wished for crowns, yet she understood stakes. Perhaps destiny was not a single road, but many, braided like the strands of leather on a bridle, though dragons wore no bridles, and neither did she. Moon climbed high before she descended to the yard. Drogon sensed her, wings rustling. She placed her hands upon warm scale. "We may have to fly south," she whispered. The dragon's eyes narrowed, twin furnaces. He rumbled low, uneasy, questioning. "We won't bend," she promised. "Not to iron chairs or golden roses. But maybe we can change their minds before spears rise." Drogon puffed smoke. The ember glow reflected in Arya's eyes made them seem alight from within. Morning council reconvened. Arya announced her decision. She would journey to King's Landing, not as subject nor threat, but as envoy with teeth of flame. Jon argued. Sansa pleaded caution. Tyrion offered to accompany. In the end, Bran merely nodded, as though a stone had rolled into its destined place. Preparations began. Ravens dispatched. Supplies bundled into netting for Drogon's talons. Gendry fashioned new leather guards for Arya's legs against heated scales. Maester Walken brewed salves and powders to keep wounds from miasma. Sansa oversaw everything with measured calm, though at night Arya saw her sister's candle burn till dawn. On the eve of departure, Arya walked the crypts one last time. Stone kings and direwolves slumbered beneath flickering torch shafts. She paused beside her father's effigy, tracing the carved edge of that gentle face. "I don't know where this road ends," she murmured, "but I'll keep our name sharp as needle." When she emerged, night air tasted of rain and ashes. She found Jon in the courtyard, ghost pale beneath lantern glow. They spoke little. Words felt thin against the weight of partings. He embraced her, tight as when they were children, pressing a small pouch into her palm. A bit of dragon glass once mined from Dragonstone, carved into a deerwolf's head. "For luck," he said, voice rough. Arya tucked it into her belt. Dawn cracked like ice. Winterfell's people gathered, silent, as Arya mounted Drogon's foreleg. The sky shimmered pale pink behind scudding clouds. With a guttural roar, the dragon surged upward, snow spiraling beneath. Yet, even before they cleared the walls, Arya looked back. She saw Sansa standing atop the gatehouse. hair bright like kindled copper, one hand raised. Jon beside her, cloak flapping. Bran within the godswood, face turned skyward though eyes saw miles beyond. Then Winterfell fell away, and the North's pine sea unfurled beneath. They climbed into sun-slivered heights. Air thinned, frost encrusted Arya's lashes. Yet her heart burned hot, furnace effete by purpose. Dragon and rider arrowed south, trailing a wake of swirling snow vapor. Somewhere ahead the green fields of the Reach shimmered, and beyond them, the spires of King's Landing pierced a hazed horizon like spears yearning for blood. But neither iron nor fire decided the shape of tomorrow alone. Between them sat a wolf girl who had once whispered death and now dreamt of skies unbound. Drogon echoed her breath with thunder. Together they flew, two stories braided into one, each heartbeat carrying them toward roads unseen, choices unmade, and a realm waiting to learn what it meant when a Stark took wing upon a dragon's back. And though dawn stretched golden before them, the day's true heat had yet to rise. The sky over the neck was a low gray arch that seemed to press the world flat, pooling mist across endless fen. Drogon's shadow slid over reed-choked channels, startling herons into ragged flight. Arya crouched low between his neck spines, face hooded against stinging drizzle, letting the dragon's wing beats drum a steady rhythm beneath her ribs. She had never flown this far south without sight of mountains. Each mile of sodden swamp whispered of ambushes and ghosts. Somewhere below, Crannog men tracked them by ripples and ripened rumors. Yet none loosed arrows. Whether fear or reverence stayed their hands, Arya could not tell, but she glimpsed painted faces vanish behind willow boles as Drogon's passing set the marsh water trembling. When they landed atop the moss-slick ramparts of Moat Cailin, the ancient stones groaned beneath talons. Broken towers jutted like rotted teeth along the causeway, and green light seeped from stagnant pools in their hollows. Arya dismounted, boots squelching on lichen, scanning the ruin. Wind sighed through arrow slits, but no banners flew, only ragged strands of ivy. She paced among toppled gargoyles, recalling Robb's great host here, the banners snapping over gleaming helms, the smell of fresh-cooked hair. Those days felt carved from another life. Drogon swung his head, nostrils flaring. From the marsh appeared a small coracle of woven reeds. Its single passenger stood, arms lifted in silent greeting. A slight figure in mottled greens, face streaked with mud. Arya's hand drifted to needle but did not draw. The stranger pulled closer, guided by currents and some unspoken courage, until the hull scraped stone. "My name is Jenna Reed," she called, voice soft as rainfall yet clear. "My father sent greeting to the wolf who rides fire." Arya studied the girl. Perhaps 14, bright-eyed, bearing a frog spear slung across her back. And what greeting is that? That the North remembers debt. Jaina's gaze flicked to Drogon, lingering on seared membranes. "We keep herbs that men scaled hide, if the dragon will brook our touch." Trust was a delicate thread. Arya tilted her head. "Bring them." Jaina nodded and slipped back into mist. Hours later, she returned with 3 slender Crannog elders. Together they brewed a pungent salve of marshmallow, bog myrtle, and powdered bone. Arya watched them smear the paste along Drogon's torn wing edges. The dragon rumbled but held still. When they finished, the eldest elder pressed a leather pouch into Arya's palm. "For the road," he whispered. "Elf's root and bitterwort. Boil with water and salt when next he bleeds." Arya thanked him. She would have paid in coin, but they asked only for word of Bran the Greenseer. She spoke of her brother seated beneath Winterfell's weirwood, and the Crannog men bowed as if hearing prophecy fulfilled. At dawn they lifted off. Drogon's wing beats boomed as if stronger for the salve, scattering mist in spirals. Moat Cailin dwindled to a scar on the causeway, and the marsh spread north like a quilt of drowned emerald. Ahead, the riverlands unfurled, rolling fields smudged with winter rye, orchards stripped bare, villages no larger than thumbprints from their height. Smoke from hearth fires drifted skyward in thin white ghosts. The realm looked peaceful at a distance, yet Arya knew the wound beneath. Bandits lingered where armies had marched, and lords pressed small folk for grain to pay new queen's debts. They descended near old stones on the Mander's bank, when Drogon's stomach grumbled loud enough to rattle his rider. Arya unlatched a net of hares she had trapped that morning. A meager portion, hardly a morsel for such a beast. Drogon gobbled them in 2 bites, then cast her a look of almost comedic reproach. "I know," she muttered, ruffling his jaw scale. "You want a cow? Next village will barter." She led him to the ruin's heart, the crumbled sepulchre of the long-dead Trident kings. Ivy strangled broken ramparts, and rain pooled in cracked sarcophagi. Histories whispered from every stone, of a king who died for love, of a queen who leapt from a tower, of songs Arya had once heard humming from Thoros, while the Brotherhood shared stew around a campfire. Memories lingered like old wine in a forgotten cask, still potent if one dared sip. That night, firelight flickered beneath shattered arches. Arya roasted a brace of partridges, feeding Drogon scraps of charred flesh to keep him patient until heartier game could be found. Wind moaned through empty halls, yet the dragon's presence made the ruins feel defended, as if some blazing hearth now warmed their dead stones. Arya curled against Drogon's foreleg beneath her cloak, and dreamed of direwolves racing moonlit snows, while stars wheeled overhead. When she woke before dawn, her breath steamed white. But Drogon's hide radiated heat like a cast-iron stove. She pressed both palms against him for warmth, savoring the paradox of winter night, married to summer flame. As they flew eastward toward the Blackwater Rush, fields greened visibly beneath them. Spring had woken earlier here. Larkspur splashed violet across meadows. Plows scarred soft earth. Children chased lambs outside crofters' huts. When Drogon's shadow rippled over tilled rows, men dropped tools, faces awash with dread and awe. Some knelt. Others fled. No arrows flew. News of a Stark atop the dragon ran ahead like wildfire in dry grass. At Maidenpool, Lord Mooten rode out beneath a white flag. His retainers trembled, but he reined his destrier level with Drogon's crouched form. Arya perched on the ridge of scale, needle strapped across her back. "Lady Stark," Mooten called, voice quavering despite practiced formality. "The Queen Regent asks your pace. She would host you under truce at Rosby 2 days hence, that you might enter the capital in orderly state." Rosby lay a day's flight from King's Landing, a minor holding still half ruined from Cersei's strip taxes and siege levies. Arya weighed the offer. "Tell Queen Margaery I accept. We will rest outside Rosby's walls, not within." Mooten bowed, grateful perhaps to live, and spurred his mount away. Drogon snorted smoke. Arya stroked his neck. "If they mean betrayal, they'll have to dig our graves from glass." She remained uneasy. Few alive knew the truest nature of dragons. Their will, their pride, their fragile bonds. Daenerys' fallen King's Landing had shown what fear could breed. Arya would not suffer chains upon Drogon, yet she would not burn 1,000 innocents merely to prove defiance. The line between freedom and tyranny could blur beneath a dragon's shadow. They camped that night beside the bywater, where reeds rustled and frogs croaked under a waning moon. Arya tethered no steed, built no tent. Drogon himself formed windbreak and furnace. She cleaned her steel in the fire glow, the blade's mirror surface catching sparks. Across the flames, a figure emerged, lean, cloaked, stepping lightly. Arya's hand tightened on Needle's hilt until she recognized him. Angui the archer halted at the edge of light, bow unstrung, half a smile on weather-lined face. "Heard rumor of a dragon north of the Rush," he drawled. "Thought only one fool I knew would ride such a beast." Arya rose, surprised warmth stirring. "You survived. Couldn't let the dead keep me." He approached slowly, eyeing Drogon, who watched, but did not stir. "Thoros is gone. Beric too, for good this time. The Brotherhood scattered. Some turned brigand. And you?" He shrugged. "Still trying to steal from the rich for the hungry, though the rich keep their gold clutched tight these days." Arya gestured to the stew pot hanging over coals. Ate. They shared rabbit stew thick with turnip and wild garlic. Angui spoke of crackdowns near Harrenhal, of Lannister troops now sworn to new banners, of small folk crushed between harvest tithes and roving sellswords. "There's talk the Queen means to outlaw free companies unmarshaled by crown, he said. Folk fear conscription. Arya listened, stirring embers with a stick. Peace built on fear was but lightning trapped in a bottle. Inevitably, glass would shatter. Drogon shifted, tail thumping the earth, sending sparks fluttering. Engai's eyes widened every time the dragon moved, but he told his tales undeterred. At dawn, he offered her a small wooden carving. A wolf's head no larger than a coin, hollowed through the center. "Whistle," he said. "If ever arrows might help." Then he melted into dawn's gray, leaving only footfalls and memories of firelight. 3 days' flight brought them near Rosby. The keep's squat towers rose from spring meadows like dirty stone mushrooms, banners of rose-entwined lion flapping half-heartedly in a damp breeze. Arya circled Drogon high, gauging walls, then guided him to land upon a fallow field beyond arrow range. She refused the offer of lodging. Instead, tents were pitched at respectful distance. Queen Margaery's party arrived by wheelhouse, accompanied by her brothers, Sir Loras, armor polished but arms still bound from earlier wounds, and Sir Garland, broad-shouldered in Tyrell green. A score of gold cloaks formed cordon, while maesters scurried to and fro. When Arya dismounted, silence met her like a wall. She strode forward, mud sucking at boots, cloak snapping in the fitful wind. The queen stepped down, skirts lifted clear of damp. Margaery's face was poised to serenity, but Arya discerned strain in the tightness around her mouth. "Lady Arya Stark," she said, voice musical yet edged with steel. "Your arrival honors the realm." Arya inclined her head. "I came to prevent new graves, your grace, not to dig them." A flash behind brown eyes, relief. Margaery gestured to a large pavilion striped in rose and gold. "May we speak within? Your companion will be fed. I arranged marsh elk. Enough, I hope." Arya glanced over her shoulder. Drogon lay sphinx-like, smoke furling lazily. Servants approached with squealing carcasses dragged on sledges. The dragon's eyes half-lidded in satisfaction. His patience had grown since Winterfell, but a hungry dragon made poor first impressions. Inside the pavilion, the air smelled of roses and damp silk. Braziers warded chill. Tyrion waited near a trestle table laden with fruit and cheese. He raised a goblet in greeting, eyes twinkling. "I took the liberty of arriving earlier, lest anyone plan mischief." Arya noted the queen's guards at each seam of canvas, crossbows at rest, but unlatched. She took a seat opposite Margaery. Tyrion poured wine for all. The queen began with cordialities, condolences for losses, praise for northern courage, well wishes for Sansa's stewardship. Arya answered curtly, unmoved by court dressings. Then Margaery's tone shifted. "The Iron Throne languishes," she said, tracing a finger around her cup. "Grain stores burned, lords quarrel. I would restore plenty, but I cannot, if every field from Harrenhal to the Trident trembles at rumor of dragonfire." Arya's brow arched. "The realm trembled long before Drogon flew here. My sister's ravens speak of bandits, broken men, taxes. Manor," Margaery acknowledged with a nod. "Yet fear multiplies hardship. A free dragon, rider unknown, breeds panic. Merchants shudder, harvesters flee. If you would station your dragon in royal service, sworn to defend rather than threaten, perhaps peace might root." Arya understood the politicking. Chain by oath rather than iron. She sipped wine, letting silence weigh. Tyrion watched, expression unreadable. At last, Arya spoke. "Drogon serves no throne. He is my friend, not my sword arm. Offer my word. We will not raise crops or castles. In return, the crown will leave the north unmolested and cease levies that bleed farmers for coffers south of the neck." "In." Margaery's smile flickered. "Your heart is northern, but the realm is 7 kingdoms. All beneath one banner." "Then stitch a banner wide enough for wolves," Arya replied. "Or risk claws." Tension coiled like a drawn bow. Sir Loras shifted, hand brushing sword pommel. Tyrion cleared his throat. "A compromise, perhaps." The crown might recognize the North's right to self-levy in exchange for a guarantee the dragon remain north of the Trident, except by royal summons or mutual accord. Arya considered. Drogon would chafe at tethering, but patrol across northern skies served him well. She turned to Margaery. Summons for what purpose? Threats from beyond. Margaery answered smoothly. Ironborn raiders grow bold. Essos watches our wounds. A dragon's presence may deter invasions. And in your court songs, he becomes the crown's pet. Arya shook her head. No. He answers only to me. Nemzerwa. The queen's composure cracked at the edges. Then you leave me little to reassure my lords. In the silence, distant roars gusted through canvas. Servants shrieked beyond the pavilion. Arya stood swiftly, hand on dagger. Tyrion peered between flaps. 7. Save us, he muttered. Outside, Drogon writhed. Shackles clamped around his hind leg. Steel links thicker than a man's wrist, driven into an iron stake hidden beneath the elk carcasses. Dozens of gold cloaks yanked chains, trying to anchor him. Drogon's lungs bellowed wild flame, turning earth to bubbling glass. Soldiers screamed, armor dripping like wax. Arya flew over trampled turf, rage flaming in her chest. She slid between Drogon and the nearest spearman. Needle flashed. A cloaked captain lunged. She ducked, hamstrung him, spun, and slashed a chain link's connecting pin. The link held. Drogon's roar shattered what composure remained. He reared, wings beating up hurricanes, claws raking trenches. Archers loosed black-fletched bolts that clanged off scale. One struck a wounded seam near his wing root. His shriek tore clouds. Arya clambered up his forelimb, ignoring heat searing through leather. She reached the cuff, jammed needle's tip into the locking hinge, prying even as Drogon thrashed. A crossbow bolt hissed past, grazing her shoulder. Pain flared, she thrust again. The hinge snapped. Chains slackened. Drogon surged upward, chains whipping. Arya threw herself onto his neck, just as he launched skyward, in a blast of scorched air. They cleared Rosbian heartbeats, climbing through low cloud. Arya clung, blood dripping from her arm onto obsidian scale. Below, fires dotted the field like fallen stars. She pressed her cheek to Drogon's neck. Easy, she whispered. I'm here. Gradually his wing beats steadied. His roar faded to grumbling breaths. High above fleecy cloud tops, wind cooled her fevered skin. Arya's pulse thundered. Rage coiled tight, at treachery, at herself for near folly. She had trusted enough to parley, yet not enough to anticipate shackles disguised as gifts. They banked east toward rumpled hills, seeking distance from pursuers, when at last Drogon glided low between grassy ridges and river mist. He settled in a secluded hollow ringed by oaks. Arya slid down, legs trembling. She examined the bolt stuck shallow in muscle. Drogon whuffed impatient, but held still while she broke the shaft and eased the head free. Blood steamed black in moonlight. She daubed the wound with bitterwort from the reed pouch, singing softly an old Winterfell lullaby. The dragon's eye half closed, breath slowing. Only after tending him did she tend herself. The graze along her shoulder bled more than it harmed. She bound it with linen torn from her undershirt, tightened by her teeth. Adrenaline ebbed. Exhaustion washed in like a dark tide. She collapsed against warm scale, staring up at a slice of sky through oak branches. Bats flitted above, silhouettes etched against stars. What now? Return north with tale of betrayal? Or turn south again, this time with fire? Neither path felt right. To burn innocence would mirror the mistakes that had birthed doom in King's Landing. Yet to flee invited endless hunts, chains and darker guises. She closed eyes, sought quiet within. Faces flickered behind lids. Sansa's measured gaze, Jon's quiet strength, Bran's knowing stillness. Their hopes tethered her. She thought too of Margaery's fear. The realm teetered beneath weight of burned memories. Any spark could tip it into chaos. A rustle in undergrowth snapped her alert. Needle flashed. A squat man emerged, palms raised, cloak emblazoned with a single burning heart. "Easy," he whispered. "I come unarmed." Arya kept blade leveled. "Who are you?" "Edric Dane," he answered, stepping into fireglow. "Once squire to Lord Beric. I witnessed the Queen's trap and followed your flight." Arya narrowed eyes. "For what purpose?" "To offer counsel." He gestured at Drogon's sleeping form. "The realm has never seen a wolf ride a dragon. Most fear what they cannot name. Some would crown it. Others would kill it. You must name yourself before they do." "Then—" She lowered needle slightly. "And what name do you suggest?" "Protector." "Not conqueror." Edric sank to one knee. "Travel the riverlands. Show the small folk your dragon is guardian, not beast. Let songs change before lords can harness rumor." It was bold and risky, yet Arya felt a tug of possibility. Her father once said a ruler must see the faces of those he would protect. On Dragonback, she could span villages in a heartbeat, scorch bandit camps preying on crofters, deliver seed grain to burned steads. A different firebrand than Queen's before, one tempered by northern ice. She sheathed needle. "If you would help, bring word to the Brotherhood's remnants. Tell them the she-wolf sky rides to break chains, not forge them." Edric's eyes gleamed. "By dawn, ravens will speak." He melted into dark as seamlessly as he'd come. Over the next weeks, Arya wove a ragged circuit across the riverlands. Drogon's appearance no longer heralded terror, but tentative hope. They descended upon a gang of sellswords extorting toll at the stone hedge ford. Drogon's roar scattering horses, Arya's blade severing the captain's ear before she bound him to a tree, with ransom note pinned through his jerkin. At Seaguard, she aided Manderley grain ships, guarding them with Drogon's shadow, until holes were emptied to famine-struck villages upriver. In dairy fields, she burned pustulant locust swarms threatening the first wheat sprouts, charring insects mid-air while farmers cheered. Stories spread swifter than ravens, of a dragon who spared cottages yet incinerated gallows, who devoured only cattle paid by those he protected, whose riders spoke little but listened much. Children carved tiny wolves with wings from driftwood. Bards penned ballads of the flame wolf. Banditry waned where her shadow fell. Not all welcomed her. At Harrenhal's charred vastness, Ser Amry Lorsh's bastard son commanded 200 armored brutes. He sneered at the notion of wolves on wings. His archers lined monster-mouth battlements, scorpion bolts tipped with laced manticore venom. Arya rode high, out of bow range, her voice carried by wind. "Free your prisoners and swear peace, or your ashes will join your forefathers." They mocked her with lewd songs. Drogon's chest rumbled like a thunderhead. Arya gave them until sundown. When the sun kissed the lakes, chains rattled. Gaunt prisoners stumbled forth. Scorpions remained aimed at sky. Arya touched Drogon's neck. Flame roared, but not at stone. She scorched only siege engines, slagging them into molten lumps. The castle she left standing, its lord kneeling at blackened parapet. Fear could coax surrender. Mercy might breed loyalty. Yet each victory carried cost. Feeding Drogon taxed local stocks. Arya hunted nightly, guiding him to wild elk and the occasional poacher turned prey. Her wounds healed, but left aching reminders of Chain's brush. Sleep grew thin. Dreams roiled with visions of red streets and shattered bells. She woke some nights gripping imaginary ash. One moonless eve on the banks of the Trident, a hooded rider sought parley. He knelt before the fire, removing cowl to reveal silver hair cropped short. Darien Waters, a Stormlander bastard once squire to Renly. He bore parchment bearing 3 seals. The crowned rose of Margaery, the kraken of House Harlaw, and the sunburst of Dorne. "A conclave forms at River Run," he said. "Queens, princes, lords great and small. They invite the she-wolf sky to speak, under sacred guest right." Arya's brows knit. Guest right means little when arrows sail. Lord Edmure swears by his wife and child. Steel will remain sheathed. Waters produced a second letter, unsigned but inked in neat hand. "I trust in paths unseen." Bah. Bran's mark, simple and oblique. Arya glanced at Drogon, nostrils steaming as he dozed near trampled reeds. Bran's visions seldom misled. Riverrun offered neutral ground between crown and discontent. Perhaps there, choices might carve new shapes. "Tell them I fly at dawn," she said. The journey to Riverrun was brief by dragonback. Morning mist clung to the water meadows. River mud glimmered like oil. The castle rose proud atop its island, banners of Tully trout flanked by gold roses and red suns. As Drogon descended, drawbridges remained lowered. Archers kept bows unstrung. Crowds filled the outer ward. Small folk, knights, even septons in rain-spattered gray. They parted as Drogon's talons touched flagstone. Silence falling as if the world inhaled. Arya dismounted, cloak sodden with cloud dew. Lord Edmure approached, face lined yet warm, Sir Bryndon's old mantle upon his shoulders. He greeted her with a bow deeper than protocol. Afterward, he held out a small clay token, a trout entwined with a dire wolf. "For safekeeping," he said softly. She closed her fingers around it. Within the great hall, rushes smelled of mint and fresh hay. Fires roared along twin hearths. High table bore an empty chair at center. No throne, simply a cedar seat carved with 7 equal sigils. Wolf, dragon, lion, flower, sun, kraken, stag. Lords and ladies ringed the hall in concentric arcs. In the front, Margaery sat flanked by Garland and Loras. To her right, Prince Trystane Martell, slim and solemn beneath stars of Nymeria's lineage. To her left, Lady Harlaw of the Iron Islands, face like carved driftwood. Arya strode the aisle, dragon-scale cloak trailing. Every eye tracked her. She paused before the empty chair but did not sit. Instead, she turned to the assembly. Words trembled at the gate of her mouth. She who spoke seldom now must forge new shape. "My name is Arya Stark," she said, voice carrying clear. "I rode south to protect my friend and my people, not to seize crowns. The North will answer no summons of fear, but neither will we abandon the realm to chaos. You fear Drogon. You fear what fire can do. So do I. Fire burned children on the Blackwater and mothers in Fleabottom. It seared my skin in the alleys of Meereen and melted bells in King's Landing." Nemes. Murmurs rippled. She pressed on. "I have chosen a different path. I will not sit a throne built on singed bones. I offer instead the dragon's shield. Let the crown cease its levies upon winter stores. Let lords cease burning small folk from their lands. In return, Drogon and I will patrol the coasts, guard against raiders, and answer any summons of true danger. So long as no chains, steel or silk, bind wolf or dragon." Now, silence followed. A deep, ponderous hush. Margaery rose, hands folded. "Would you swear such intent before gods and men?" Arya nodded once. "I swear by the old gods and the new." She drew needle, sliced her palm, letting blood drip onto flagstones. "And by the blood I spill freely, never coerced." The dragon outside rumbled as if echoing the pledge. Winds whipped banners overhead. Lords exchanged glances. Lady Harlaw stepped forward. "What of the Ironborn raiding the stony shore? They sail swift, burn swift." Arya met her gaze. "Guide us to their fleet. Drogon's fire will answer their torches." Trystane Martell tapped the hilt of his dagger. "And what of Dorne's rights, ignored by Old Town collectives? Show me injustice, and we will stand in its path." Margaery's gaze softened, the steel subsiding beneath empathy. She extended her hand. "Then let this hall witness. The crown accepts the pledge of the she-wolf sky. The realm gains guardian, not conqueror." Enter. Relief unfurled through the room like sunlight breaking cloud. Applause rose, tentative, then gathering force. Arya clasped the queen's hand. Their palms met, her blood smearing rose-embroidered silk. A covenant sealed in scar and silk, witnessed by fire outside. Feasts followed, tentative celebrations. More for hope than triumph. Arya ate sparingly, slipping from tables to walk ramparts under moon. Drogon roosted upon River Rhone's outer wall, eyes burnished mirrors to torchlight, content yet watchful. She leaned against warm scale, feeling for the first time not alone amid faces and vows. Yet peace is fragile glass. Ravens from the east spoke of a fleet bearing black sails trimmed with red, Triarch mercenaries hired by exiled nobles who saw opportunity in a realm rebuilding. They marshaled war galleys along Massey's Hook, poised to strike grain ports. The Crown's navy lay splintered. Only fragmentary fleets could muster. By council's end, all eyes turned to Arya. The North's guardian might become the realm's shield sooner than expected. She met their stares unflinching. "Drogon and I will meet them," she declared. "But I will not fight alone. Send ships to rescue sailors from burning decks. Send septons to tend wounds. If we wield fire, we must also wield mercy." Her words planted seeds deeper than laws. Lords who built power upon swords tasted shame, others inspiration. And beneath the vaulted ceiling of that castle where rivers met, a new legend took root, not of dragon queens or wolf kings, but of a girl whose scars sang of deaths averted, whose blade etched mercy beside flame. Dawn 3 days later found Arya upon Drogon's back once more, rising from River Run's curtain wall in a torrent of beating wings. Trumpets blared farewell, banners dipped. In her satchel, she carried treaties inked at midnight, small as seeds yet heavy with promise. Below, the trident shimmered rosy beneath sunrise. Ahead, the sea awaited, along with black sails, iron ambition, and the testing ground of her fragile covenant. Wind roared past, whipping her braids. She touched the dragon-glass direwolf at her neck and whispered toward unseen siblings far to the north. "I'll come home again." Drogon's answering bellow seemed to promise the sky would still be there when she did. They banked southeast, firelight glinting along river bends like molten gold. Fields blurred below, dotted with figures pointing upward, some cheering, some crossing hearts. Arya breathed deep. Fear would linger, she knew. But each day, she could burn away a little more of it. Not with flame, but with the relentless proof that power could choose restraint. And somewhere beyond the rolling hills, the sea echoed her resolve, horizon brightening into a blade of silver light. Drogon tipped his wings toward it, and Arya did not look back. Salt wind keened across Drogon's wings as he skimmed the chop south of Crackclaw Point, his shadow darkening whitecaps into fleeting mirrors of night. Arya rode low between obsidian ridges, cloak whipped behind her like a torn pennon, hair plastered to her skull with brine. Dawn broke blood-red over a rough horizon, staining the sea the hue of raw meat. Fishermen called such color a wolf's sunrise. With each gust, she tasted iron and foam, and the throb of distant war drums beating within her chest. Below stretched an armada unlike any Westerosi fleet, a forest of masts flying black pennants tipped in scarlet flames, hulls sleek and brutal as sharkbacks. The Triarch Free Brotherhood, sailors termed them, corsairs bound to 3 merchant princes exiled from Volantis after failed revolt. Their gold had hired Banshee-fast galleys crewed by Tolos spearmen and Cohoric axemen, 50 warships in all, escorted by supply hulks twice as many. It was a dagger thrust toward King's Landing's throat, and Arya could almost sense the realm holding its breath, waiting to learn if the dragon's promise held teeth. But she would not strike yet. Each deck thronged with pressed oarsmen, rowers chained ankle to ankle, slaves, or near enough. To bathe them in wildfire was to murder the very people she meant to protect. So she watched, circling high on thermals, counting sails, marking the pattern of escorts. A cluster of 3 arrow-slim Dromans led the vanguard, their prow statues shaped into fanged leviathans. Larger cargo carracks wallowed behind, offloading pitch barrels into launch boats that scudded shoreward under ragged canvas. Ahead, smoke curled from bonfires along Massey's Hook, evidence of raiders already ashore. Arya banked Drogon west, hunting vantage. The dragon climbed through streaks of sea mist, each wingbeat sending tremors through her bones. Above cloud wisps, the sky cleared, and sunrise bled gold across scale black as midnight. She set a course for a slivered promontory that jutted like a spear into the bay. Stonehelm's forgotten lighthouse, shattered in Robert's rebellion, now a mere ring of sundered stone. Drogon alighted upon the ruin, scattering gulls in shrieking panic. Arya dismounted, boots crunching barnacle-crusted rubble, and squinted northward. King's Landing's distant silhouette shimmered at horizon's lip, half lost in marine haze. Between her and the capital, only a handful of loyal sail dotted the waters, gullets from Dragonstone, a weather-scarred Lysine cog pressed into service, 2 Mirish warships purchased at ruinous cost. Far too few. Margaery's ravens had promised more, but time and tide seldom bowed to ink. She knelt beside a shattered parapet, unrolled a crude charcoal map scrawled on sailcloth by trident fishermen, and studied likely courses. The corsairs steered north-northwest on prevailing currents. If she struck the vanguard before it reached Blackwater Bay, the heavy supply hulks would gap behind. Easy prey for loyal patrols. But a single misjudged gout of flame could ignite pitch casks and cook hundreds of chained oarsmen alive. The thought curdled her stomach. A flicker of movement drew her eye, 3 gulls wheeling around Drogon's muzzle, daring his stillness. He snapped sideways, they scattered. The dragon's amber pupils pinned Arya. Impatient, she rose, stroking the warm scale ridge above his nostrils. "We wait," she murmured. "Sun high, then strike." Drogon huffed smoke. Impatience, but acceptance. Together they watched the horizon, 2 predators measuring the tides. Hours crept. Arya paced the crumbled ring, mind chewing through possibilities. Every so often she knelt, practicing the Braavosi breath pattern Syrio had taught. The heart's quiet, the blades calm, until tension eased from shoulders and decisions sharpened. Drogon dozed, curled around the lighthouse stump, but one eye remained half-lidded on her like a banked ember. Near midday she heard distant drums. Dull, rhythmic thuds carried by wind over leagues of water. She climbed atop Drogon's foreleg, shading her eyes. There, the lead galleys closed wedge-like, oars flashing silver. Sunlight glimmered off ballista arms primed midships. Farther astern, smoke streaked skywards where raiders torched a fishing hamlet. Rage flared in Arya's gut, old and cold and familiar. She mounted, felt scales shift beneath knees, and whispered the command that was more intent than word. Drogon surged upward, wings cleaving air like giant sighs. They angled east, sun at their backs, descending into the blind spot between glare and wave. Sea wind became furnace wind as Drogon exhaled, testing throat fire. Arya drew needle, though steel felt symbolic from such height. Still, it steadied her hand. Below, the lead Drogon's watchman gaped skyward, conchhorn slipping from slack fingers. By the time the shriek of warning rose, Drogon was upon them. But Arya steered his head away from the crowded oar deck. Instead, she pointed toward the prow. The dragon loosed a measured jet, flame white-hot at core, sweeping across figurehead and forecastle. Tar-soaked rope exploded. The ship's ballista, primed, melted into a sagging skeleton. Fire gnashed forward with hunger, but guttered short of rowers, licked instead along rails where bowmen scrambled in panic. Droplets of molten bronze rained like comet shards. Drogon banked hard, tail scything, rigging snapped, mast folded like straw. The galley veered starboard, aflame but afloat. Bolts hissed upward from the flanking Dromond. Dozens, barbed, some tipped with glimmering green glass. Drogon rolled, letting most pass wide, yet one lodged on the edge of his left wing membrane. Arya felt the impact like a hammer through her shins. Drogon roared, flame belching uncontrolled. She steadied him, stroking neck. Easy, talons not fire this time. They dove again, target, ballista cruise. Drogon's claws slashed the mid-deck platform, scattering engineers like dice. Wood cracked, the siege engine toppled into sea, crew tumbling amid shattered beams. Another bolt whistled, skimming Arya's shoulder pauldron, sending sparks. Drogon rose, wheeling. Arrow storms followed, most bouncing from scale, a few splintering on bone ridges. Arya scanned for vulnerabilities. Stacked pitch barrels clustered aft, near the steering deck, too near rowers for open flame. She sheathed needle, drew a dragonglass dagger instead, and whispered an idea half mad. She guided Drogon lower until sea spray kissed her boots, then leapt. Splashed onto the aft deck of the wounded First Drummond. The jolt rattled teeth, but training absorbed shock. Startled Kahoric axemen charged. She ducked, parried with dragonglass, blade flashing obsidian arcs that left throats red smiling. Smoke swirled, heat pressing. She sprinted between toppled crates, kicking lids from pitch pots, sloshing sticky black tar across planking. A crossbow twanged. She felt a graze across hip but kept moving. She hurled a torch into the smeared pitch, rolling sideways as flames leapt. Then she sprang to starboard rail, whistled. The wooden wolfangi had carved. Drogon stooped, jaws wide, and Arya leapt again, grasping a forespur, scrambling onto saddleless shoulders slick with salt. Fire blossomed behind but contained aft. Rowers screamed as tar smoke thickened. Yet the blaze devoured stern castle, not central hold where they sat. The rudder burned away. The Drummond yawed, spinning. Oars dipped useless, crashing into each other. Disabled. Now to sever vanguard cohesion. Arya steered toward the third galley still unscathed. This time, she ordered no flame. Drogon angled in low, massive jaws cracking the starboard outrigger like dry twigs. A dozen oars shattered, rowers tumbling into seawater whipped white. Repeat pass, and port outrigger snapped under claw. The galley lost propulsion, drifting. Within minutes, all three lead ships lay crippled, burning or both, churning confused eddies. But escort carracks rumbled behind, their decks lined with trebuchets primed to lob casks of green wildfire stolen from sacked Pentoshi arsenals. Arya saw pyromancers in cracked Stygian robes chanting, flames licking from cask seams. One heaved skyward, arcing toward Drogon. He veered, but the weighted jar whistled past, plunging into sea with a hiss and a violet bloom of noxious smoke. If a single jar struck troop decks, the slaves would die screaming. Arya clenched fists. Precision could not win against wildfire volleys. She must blind them at source. She directed Drogon to strafe from stern, where flame stores lay less dense. A shallow burst scorched the trebuchet frames without igniting the slug jars. Wood charred black, gears warped, arms locked mid-creep. Crew flung themselves overboard. But on the second carrack, a jar slipped free, shattered against mid-deck. An emerald fire blossomed. Arya choked. Memories of King's Landing's inferno surge, the stench of burnt flesh. Drogon screamed, banking wide of the rising green pillar. Casks erupted in chain reaction. The ship exploded, keel splitting, showering flaming planks across water. A towering column of wildfire roared skyward, painting clouds viridian, and Arya prayed wind wouldn't carry the blaze onto rowers adrift nearby. She scanned for survivors, but the inferno's heat made approach impossible. The smell of roasted pitch sickened her. Yet the blast also terrified the remaining carracks. Their captains swung sails, retreating southward to regroup. The supply hulks, slower, already veered east, abandoning wedge formation. The vanguard shattered. From the north horizon, faint but growing, loyal pennants finally appeared. Manderley Cog Winter's Grace, Bar Emmon's Galley Gullwing, and a motley assembly of Stormlander fishing keels bristling with archers. They angled to intercept the crippled Triarch hulls, nets ready for drowning oarsmen. Arya exhaled, tension ebbing. But the battle was not done. Raiders ashore still burned hamlets, and south toward Cape Wrath more black sails prowled for softer targets. She guided Drogon inland now, following smoke columns over Massey's Hook. Pine woods crackled, where corsairs torched cabins to draw defenders. She saw clusters of villagers herded toward the beach. Women clutched by chain-knit gauntlets. Fury ignited. Drogon stooped, but this time she unleashed his full fire. A streak of crimson lit the sky, lancing through treetops, engulfing raider ranks. Sand hissed as heat made glass. Where captives crouched, Arya called hold. Drogon banked, flames seething in tight arcs that isolated corsairs without scorching innocence. Smoke roiled, Screams turned from triumphant to terrified. Arya leapt once more, landing amidst chaos, dragging Needle in a glittering circle. Raiders lunged. She flowed around axes, hamstringing, dispatching with quick thrusts. Captives scrambled free. She tossed a short blade to a sturdy farmwife. They fought back to back until the last corsair fell spitting curses in Valyrian. Villagers stared, some weeping. She pointed them toward the cliff trail where Stormlander levies would soon arrive, then whistled. Drogon settled, tail curling protectively, until the refugees vanished behind pines. For 2 days the hunt continued up and down the coast. Flying, scouting, striking. Each skirmish tested Arya's resolve to temper flame with mercy. She lost count of arrow grazes. Drogon suffered 3 more bolts that demanded midnight care under flickering campfire. Yet together, they broke the Triarch expedition. Supply lines cut, leadership crispy or drowned, the corsairs fled seaward in fractured packs. Loyal cogs harried their retreat. Merling King storms took the rest. On the 3rd night, Arya and Drogon knelt amid dune grass above a cove aglow with debris fires, the sea whispering like a tired beast. Moonlight silvered Drogon's wounds, edges salved with reed paste. Arya cleaned Needle by starlight, each wipe across linen, a prayer for the faces she could not save. When she sheathed the blade, exhaustion hit like a warhammer. She leaned against Dragon's stomach, listening to tidal hush and steady heartbeats beneath scale. For the first time since Winterfell, she let tears slip, quiet, unbidden, washing salt tracks over grime. Drogon's wing curved around, a sheltering arch that blocked sea wind. She slept. A raven found them at dawn, blue wax seal stamped with twin roses. Arya read by slanted sunlight. The realm thanks its guardian. Small folk sing. Council begs audience at King's Landing to ratify the Dragon's Compact in full. And beneath, Tyrion's cramped scrawl added, "Bring Needle for certain Lords Arses." She snorted, folding the vellum. The sea battle had proved 1 point. Drogon's deterrence saved thousands. The Crown now sought to codify their bargain. Yet a city that once tried to shackle a dragon could not be fully trusted. Still, to shape the realm's future, she must stand where laws were writ. She kicked sand, weighing choice. Drogon nudged her with his snout, pupils reflecting sunrise. "Aye," she muttered, rubbing the scar on her palm. South again. They flew over Duskendale at noon, villagers waving banners hastily inked with wolfen wing. As Blackwater Bay opened beneath, Arya's heart hammered. Memories crashed. The riot where she'd nearly been trampled, wildfire nights, the clanging of bells amid dragon firestorm. She released a slow breath. That city had seen horrors. Now it might see hope. Yet as they approached the city's southern vista, she saw change. The rubble of Aegon's high hill had been cleared, replaced by tiered gardens planted with hardy grass and saplings. A scar-turned living tribute to what fire had taken. The Red Keep itself still rose, though half its towers bore new stone, lighter in hue. Along ramparts stood banners of rose and lion quartered with trout and direwolf, fluttering in onshore breeze. And upon the mudgate, crowds thronged, craning upward to witness the she-wolf sky arrive. Arya guided Drogon toward the massive training yard just inside the city's eastern wall, old parade ground where Margaery had ordered stables torn down and the dirt tamped anew for dragon alighting. Soldiers cleared as Drogon descended, sand billowing. Arya slid to ground, knees bending to absorb impact. A hush fell, thick as velvet. She scanned tense faces, fearful yet glowing with something brighter than awe. She offered a nod. Conversations erupted, excitement tumbling over caution. Ser Davos Seaworth strode forward from the gatehouse. Clad in simple wool, behind him a half-dozen unsullied left from Daenerys March, now wearing gold cloaks trimmed gray. He bowed awkwardly. "Aim lady, a sight for sore eyes and sorer seas." Arya clasped his forearm. "You and your onion jokes. Never know when I'll be pickled." He grinned, but his eyes flicked warily to Drogon's towering shape. Council waits in the throne chamber, or what remnant of it stands. The Red Keep's inner courtyard smelled of mortar dust and fresh-cut cedar. Carpenters paused work. hammers stilled on unfinished archways. Arya recalled the last time she'd tread these halls, as a half-starved girl chasing rumors of names to cross from her list, heart clenched like a fist. Now her boots thudded confident, along marble scored with scorch marks. Tyrion greeted her under a fractured lion bas-relief, brow bandaged. "Your arrival saved my head," he said, voice wry. "In every sense." Some on the council argued direly that you'd join the Corsairs. "Yeah. Then they understand little of wolves." "Indeed. Come, let us dazzle them with your unpolished charm." They entered the throne chamber, or what remained after Drogon's prior fury. Gone was the Iron Throne. In its place a circular council dais of pale weirwood planks, supported by pillars wreathed with living vines. A Tyrell touch. Sunlight speared through open arches, dappling the floor with leaf-shaped gold. Queen Margaery sat center, dressed in muted mauve rather than triumphal rose, perhaps signaling humility. Lords arrayed around: Prince Trystane, Lord Garland, Lady Harlaw, even Lord Tarly returned from Old Town pale and silent. Margaery rose. "Lady Arya of House Stark," she intoned. "Protector of the North, guardian of flame." Arya halted before dais, resisting urge to shift weight. "I stand for those without voice." "Speak your purpose." A maester raised a roll of parchment. "Draft articles of the Dragon's Compact." He cleared throat. 1. The Crown grants House Stark perpetual right to maintain a free dragon under their protection, unimpeded by leash or levy, so long as said dragon refrains from unprovoked assault upon the Crown's subjects. Murmurs. Lady Harlaw muttered of definitions of unprovoked. Arya said nothing yet. 2. The Dragon and Rider pledged to answer legitimate summons against external invasion, wights or other calamity threatening the realm entire, with reasonable notice and logistical support. 3. No ballistae, scorpions or other dragon-slaying engines shall be housed inside King's Landing or any Crown-controlled stronghold save during active invasion. A rumble of dissent from Tarly. Garland laid a calming hand on his arm. 4. The North shall supply grain surplus to the Crown in winters mild. The Crown shall relieve the North with coin or seed during summer's lean. This exchange to be overseen by neutral maesters in Wintertown and Rosby. 5. Should the dragon perish, no claim upon its remains shall be made without consent of the rider. Arya almost smiled. That clause bore Tyrion's cunning. Dragon bones fetched fortunes. 6. In return for these accords, Lady Arya shall hold honorary seat on the small council as voice of the commons, empowered to speak and vote on matters of justice and relief. Gasps. Noble tradition buckled here. Arya inhaled. Commons had never held official seat. She met Margaery's gaze. The Queen's eyes brimmed challenge and invitation. The maester paused, throat bobbing. 7. Violations of these terms by either party void the compact. Arbitration shall be sought first through neutral conclave of maesters and septons, unless war renders such counsel impossible. Silence rippled. A gull cried outside. Arya weighed each article. Teeth of protection, belly of compromise. Needle's hilt warmed under palm. At last she spoke. Add clause. Any summons must guarantee safe passage through southern airspace. No bolts loosed by mistake in the riverlands. A handful of lords winced, remembering Rosby. Margaery inclined head. Agreed. Quill scratched. End. Arya added, voice clear. The Crown will outlaw the chaining of oarsmen to benches. Dragonfire burns slave chains in Slaver's Bay. It will burn them here. A wave of uneasy shifting. Margaery's brow furrowed, but she lifted chin. So sworn. The Queen rose, descending steps to stand eye level. Do you, Arya Stark, swear to guard without seeking dominion, to save when strength allows, and to honor life above vengeance? Ghosts stirred, Joffrey choking, Meryn's screams, Walder's crumbling throat. Arya's past bled into present like ink across parchment. Could one sworn to death now vow to life? She thought of the farmwife with the borrowed blade, of rowers hauled from sinking hulls, of Bran's quiet faith. She laid her hand atop the weirwood dais, feeling the living grain pulse, faint. "I swear," she said, voice low but firm. "By snow and flame, steel and blood." Marguerite extended a silver chain from which hung twin pendants, direwolf carved from milk glass and dragon wrought in jet. She clasped it around Arya's neck, alongside the dragonglass wolf Jon had given. "Then let all know the realm is under watch of sky and snow." Applause rose, staggered, uncertain, then swelling. Arya felt weight settle on shoulders heavier than any cloak. Yet with weight came something like release. The list in her mind quieted. Names still burned, but new names joined, ones worth protecting. Later, atop Aegon's once ruined hill, she walked gardens newly planted, saplings creaking in spring breeze. Tyrion toddled beside, sipping watered wine. "I once lusted for dragons," he admitted. "Now I find myself grateful someone better holds their leash. Pardon, companionship." Arya glanced at a sapling oak. "I once lusted for revenge. And now? I merely keep watch." She knelt, pressing fingers to earth around the sapling's roots. Soft soil, moist with recent rain. Life coaxed from ruin. She straightened, facing west where Drogon perched upon a half-rebuilt tower, wings cloaked around masonry like gargoyle sentinel. He regarded the city, her city now, in part, with eyes ancient and flickers of ember light. For a moment Arya imagined centuries passing, vines overtaking stone, children playing in dragon shadow unafraid, stories told of the she-wolf sky who kept knives sheathed unless night itself threatened. But futures veer. She sensed footsteps approaching, light, measured. Sansa stepped from cypress shade, red hair coiled beneath travel hood. Gulls cried overhead. The sisters tucked wind-whipped strands behind ears in near synchrony. They regarded one another a heartbeat before embracing. "I thought you'd remain north," Arya murmured against fox fur. Sansa pulled back. A queen's wedding envoy. Someone had to ensure banners were stitched straight. Her smile, soft yet edged with memory, faded as she studied Arya's healing cuts. "So much weight for your shoulders." "I carry winged help." Arya motioned skyward. Drogon rumbled low greeting. Sansa's eyes reflected the dragon's silhouette, awe tempered by pragmatic stark caution. "South remembers dragons raising. They may forget mercy, then we'll remind them daily." Together they wandered stone-lined paths, sharing winter camp stories. Bran's latest riddles, Jon's attempts to teach direwolf pups not to steal bread. Sunways slanted, bells tolled mournful from Baelor's sept-rebuilt shell. Where war once roared, peace trembled awake, fragile as robin's eggs. At dusk, a raven arrived from beyond the wall. Its missive brief, in Bran's distinct clipped runes. Shadows stir where ice never dies. Old powers test chains. Keep watch north. Arya read twice, jaw tightening. Peace seldom idled long. Night cloaked the city in lavender haze. Torches lined ramparts. Distant laughter drifted from flea-bottom taverns reopened. Arya stood on the repaired wind's bastion tower, the same vantage Daenerys had taken before bells. She felt ghosts swirling, of broken queens, charred innocents, wolves at gallows gate. Yet moonlight silvered fresh mortar, where builders strived to knit past and future. Below, Drogon glided over rooftops, breath fanning chimneys rather than burning them, patrolling like a silent comet trailing ember dust. His flight path traced wards and slums alike without prejudice. She watched, pride swelling, not for power, but for possibility. A dragon unchained could scour or safeguard. Choice lay ever with the rider. She turned north, toward stars guiding home. One day she would return to Winterfell, perhaps bearing seedlings of these new gardens, perhaps leading envoys rather than enemies. But first, she would stand here at the realm's heart. A wolf among roses, a blade among quills, a guardian whose oath was carved in flame and tempered by snow. Far below, small folk looked skyward as Drogon soared over the street of looms. Children pointed, eyes wide, not in terror, but wonder. Arya's mouth curved into a tiny smile. Wonder, she realized, might be the rarest coin a war-torn land could still spend. She touched the twin pendants at her throat and whispered, "Not today, darkness." Wind caught the words, scattering them across starlit red keep. Drogon banked, answering rumble rolling like distant thunder. And beneath that unblinking moon, the she-wolf sky kept watch, blade restful. Wings open, poised between fury and grace, while dawn's yet unborn light waited just beyond the rim of night.